Hello, everybody, friends of Where to Be. I'm so glad today to have here with us the new guest with Tobias Hayashi, who actually is an orchid photographer and researcher. Thank you very much, Tobias, to be here with us. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Daniela. I'm very well, thank you.
So where are you, Tobias, right now?
Yes, I'm from Canberra, but I'm currently living with my partner in northeast Arnhem Land. So my partner works for an Aboriginal corporation here on Elcho Island, which is a small island off the coast of northeast Arnhem Land, so the top of the Northern Territory in Australia. So it's a pretty remote place, and it's a really interesting place to have the opportunity to live. Yeah, it's so different from Canberra and Southern Australia.
Yeah, that sounds so fascinating. We are here to talk about your book, which is about orchids from Canberra mountains, right? But before asking you some questions about your book, I would like to know a little bit about your story with orchids. So your link between your link with orchids, how you ended up with being fascinating to them.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Being fascinated with them. Yeah, I grew up in Brisbane, and I think it's just one of those things. I was always interested in the natural world, and I started off as a bird watcher and spent a lot of time bird watching, and would always be begging my dad to take me to some exotic places to see exciting birds, and so I've continued that. I still regularly go bird watching and searching for birds, but as I kind of got older and learned more, I guess I kind of became interested in other parts of the natural world as well, and mammals and reptiles. Not quite as much as birds, but I was kind of interested in everything that moved. And then when I got to university, I took a couple of courses in botany and plant ecology, and I became interested in plants as well. And at that point, I'd kind of heard about native orchids as being this kind of elusive, interesting thing that there was, but I hadn't really seen them before. And on one field trip, one undergraduate field trip, I remember we were walking along a track on the south coast, and I came across an orchid, which I now know is a nodding greenhood. But at the time, I had no idea what it was. It's got this kind of weird shape, that kind of goes over like this. It doesn't really look like a flower, but it's not a mushroom, so I wasn't sure what it was. And I was like, this is so crazy. And so then I found out that it was an orchid. And so I think since then I was kind of interested in them, and my partner Alice and I spent quite a bit of time, kind of together learning about the orchids, and we would, spend lots of time going camping and, looking for orchids. And it was really nice that we kind of got to know that orchid world a bit together as well, I think.
Fantastic.
Yeah, certainly a fascination with the amazing shapes and
yeah, and Queensland must be something really inspiring for orchids, because it's very rich. Queensland is very rich in species, right?
Yeah, I wasn't into orchids when I was living in Brisbane, so I really want to go back.
That's right.
I really want to go back and try again and find some of those tropical orchids, because again they're very different from the ones you get in Canberra.
And also you are an amazing photographer, because I saw some of your pictures, and so have you been always attracted by photography, and then you became closer to orchids because you discovered new subjects to photograph. How did you get passionate about photography as well?
Yeah, like you said, it was something that that I kind of started out, photographing birds, as you do if you're interested in, you're interested in things, and photographing that is a good way of kind of exploring that interest. And yeah, then when I got interested in orchids, it was a natural thing to do, I guess. But also, orchids I really enjoy the process of finding orchids first of all, but then also photographing orchids, because they're not like birds. They don't run away, so you can spend as long as you like. You can spend an hour, 2 hours more photographing an orchid if you want. There's kind of so much possibility to photograph and spend as much time as you want photographing them. So I think I enjoyed that kind of slower pace, and you can really take your time with the photography and really, play around with it.
Your book, sounds like also a journey into the Canberra mountains to me. So I don't know, but I imagine you walking into these mountains, into these beautiful landscapes, and finding these surprising plants. So can you tell us about your journey in deciding to write a book and collect your photograph and your photos, and your journey in doing the book? So I imagine that it's not something that you can do in few days, because finding such a diversity of species in the mountains is really a journey. You need to walk at least. Just if you can give us a taste of your journey in making this book, would be very great for our listeners, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting how it came about. Actually, I've always loved books, and I think I've always wanted to kind of make books and be part of making books. But the way this one was actually a project that Jean Egan and Tony Wood, who are two kind of stalwarts, if you like, of the Canberra orchid scene. They've been a big part of the Canberra orchid scene for a long time, for many decades, and so this was kind of their they kind of set out to kind of combine their knowledge of the Canberra orchid scene and kind of put some of that knowledge into a book. So that's how it originally started, was with Jean and Tony. But and I've known Jean and Tony almost as long as I've been interested in orchids. They were kind of they've helped me a lot, in the over the years. Kind of, we've been out many times together looking for orchids and the like. So I knew them before that. But so the two of them started that project, and then not that long into that, Tony passed away, and so that kind of left Jean with a very big job of trying to bring a book, to completion alone, and I think that would have been incredibly hard. So she asked me to step in to kind of help make that happen, I guess, and to kind of make sure that idea was kind of actually brought to fruition. So a lot of the original kind of idea was that Tony, who was also a very good photographer, he had photographed a lot of the orchids already. And so where possible, we tried to include as much of Tony's photography as we could, as to kind of honor that part of the book, I guess. and so we're very happy that the book, you know, kind of has his name on it as well. And yeah, so a lot of my contribution, you know, there were a fair few orchids as well that we needed to add, and that we would go out on field trips to kind of try and find and add, you know, photographs so we could add to the book. But yeah, a lot of sorry, yeah, no a lot of the, you know, like I was yeah, kind of, I was able to help out a lot with the kind of the pulling it all together and kind of combining some of that more
made by your friends,
yeah, and also I guess having a background in orchid research as well, to kind of really try and put a bit of a focus on the ecology of the orchids as well, because they are such interesting organisms, and they have this, you know, really intricate relationships with you know, pollinators and mycorrhizal fungi, and to try and incorporate that into the book as well was a bit of a focus too.
Yeah, fantastic. And I saw on your background, I recognize the genus because so it's Sprantes. We have also in Europe, in Italy, and this is from Canberra Mountains.
Yeah, so this is from the Snowy Mountains, just south of Canberra. A beautiful place. There were a clump of Spiranthes growing right next to a river. It was, yeah, they're very colourful. They're very colourful.
And is there any species that you want to mention in the process of you know, hunting orchids for this project, book project, that you particularly enjoy when you just found you were particularly surprised? Is there any species that you would like to mention for this reason?
I think all orchids are fun to find, but I'll mention a couple. I'll mention the Canberra spider orchid first, because that's an orchid that is very famously Canberra, if you like. It's of Canberra, and
symbol.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost restricted to the ACT. There've recently been some discoveries just across the border, but it's an amazing little spider orchid that is found in bush, you know, quite close to suburbs, and that was a species I did my honours research on. So it's a species that I'm very fond of. I was working with trying to find out what the pollinator of this orchid is, and it's a sexually deceptive spider orchid, like many spider orchids. Yeah. And I was able to find the pollinator of that one. So that was really cool.
Can you tell us about the pollinator?
Yeah, so it's quite a small thinine wasp. Like other spider orchids, it's a thinine wasp pollinator. But obviously, unsurprisingly, perhaps it's an undescribed species, but it was also quite an unusual wasp. So the wasp taxonomist for thinine wasps, Graham Brown, wasn't even quite sure what genus to put it in. So it's a bit of an unknown identity.
A mystery wasp. Story. A mystery wasp.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's only one wasp pollinator, like one species of wasp pollinator, like many other sexually deceptive orchids. And the other orchid I think I'll mention is these tiny little orchids called midge orchids, or Corinna stylus.
Yeah.
That are quite diverse in drier areas, particularly in dry areas of New South Wales and Victoria. I think there's only one or two in Western Australia, but in around Canberra there's quite a few species, and they're very small and they've got tiny flowers, and they're not very showy, but they're very cryptic and hard to find, and I'm quite fond of them for some reason. They're very small and hard to find. Maybe that's why I like them.
Okay, Tobias. So actually, we have a kind of orchid in common that is pseudostylus that we both had the chance to study, to do some research about. And you did such an incredible discovery about this orchid. So, firstly, congratulations in person for that. But can you just, tell us about this amazing discovery you and your authors have done?
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, like you say, it's kind of funny. We've got that in common. I think you would have been doing the field work with Pterostylus sanguinea. I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 years ago now, and then I was back at exactly the same place, at exactly the same field site in Kings Park. I don't know, 6 or 7 years later, and so in your study, you'd shown that that indeed, you know, Pterostylus sanguinea or Pterostylus orbiculata, as it's now called, is sexually deceptive, and it's pollinated by a single species of gnat, you know, a fungus gnat.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a really good study to kind of lay the groundwork for, you know, this is the pollinator for this orchid, and this is how it works. And so during my PhD, when I was working, the focus was on pollination in the genus Pterostylus, and so that was a good opportunity because, you know, that groundwork had already been laid. It was a good opportunity for me to you know, ask some follow-up questions like, you know, now that we know that it's sexually deceptive, what kinds of compounds do the orchid produce, you know, to attract the male fungus gnat, and how does it mimic the female fungus gnat? And so that was what I was working on when I was in Perth. It took me 3 field seasons and a couple of months each field season to get to the bottom of it. But I think we were lucky to be able to do that in 3 field seasons, because sometimes it takes much longer than that. But yeah, so I was pretty excited to be able to work on that, and we were able to show that that there is one compound that the orchid produces in particular, which is important for pollination, and this compound is a hydrocarbon. So it's made up of carbons to hydrogens, 23 carbons long, but it has three double bonds, or three double bonds along that chain, and that's quite an unusual natural compound. So these hydrocarbons are quite commonly produced by flowers as kind of components of the waxy or the outer layer of the flower, and they're used to help prevent desiccation and generally seal the outer layer of the plant. But it's quite unusual for these compounds to have more than one double bond. Sometimes they have one double bond, but for them to have more than one or even 2 double bonds is kind of quite unusual. And so what we found were that there were 5 compounds that were produced both by the orchid and the female fungus gnat. And of these 5 compounds, this one compound with 3 double bonds was the crucial bit. And if you didn't have that, you know, if you didn't have that compound, then you would get no attraction. Incredible. And so this one compound is the critical bit. And it's interesting that even though, like I said, they're quite rare in nature, these compounds, and it was the first time that this particular compound had been found in a plant before. But these types of compounds with 3 double bonds and, you know, 20 odd carbons long are also known as moth sex pheromones. So some moths produce a sex pheromone which is similar, not exactly the same, but similar to the one that we found in these orchids, which is really interesting because they're pollinated by fungus gnats and not moths. But there's an interesting parallel there.
Wow, that's so interesting. And so to rule out all the possible other compounds that potentially were also involved in the attraction. So you needed to carry out different experiments. Did you do those experiments in the field or in laboratory? Where did you do?
Yeah, so for this one, we actually used some laboratory bioassays, because the fungus gnats, you can keep them in the lab for a day or two. And so what we did was we used a technique called prep GC, and the way that works is basically you inject some of your orchid extract onto a gas chromatography machine, and that basically allows you to separate the compounds across time according to their chemical properties. And so using this technique called prep GC, we're able to take fractions of the extract. Mm-hmm. So we end up with 4 fractions. So we're basically taking the whole extract and dividing it into 4. And what we found when we presented these fractions to the male gnats in the lab, we found that they responded to only 1 fraction. And that fraction was a fraction that contained this one compound with 3 double bonds, but also another compound very similar, but only had 2 double bonds. And so that kind of gave us some clues that, you know, these were the important compounds. And then after that, we basically, and by we, I mean the chemical ecologists on our team, basically produced these compounds synthetically in the lab in order to be able to prove that they were the right compounds. And then using these synthetic versions of compounds, we could then recreate the orchid blend, and then we could present these this kind of synthetic blend to the fungus gnats, the male fungus gnats in the field, and kind of test how they respond. So that's kind of the final confirmation, is to be able to present the blend that you've made yourself synthetically, and confirm that it does indeed work.
Such a sophisticated work, because yeah, it takes time. So I'm really impressed by. Of course, it has been published on Current Biology, so which is a really prestigious journal for biological discoveries. That's great, fascinating. So thank you for sharing this discovery you made. But you also have a website. If anyone would be interested to follow your movements, your projects, and your photos as well, to have a look to your photos, and also buy your book. Where, how can people do?
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, I've got a website. The book is actually sold out at the moment. We only did a relatively small print run, and sold very well. So it's sold out at the moment. But I'm really hoping to be able to make a second edition. Wow. Almost as soon as
I book a copy if I can. Right now, I'm currently in China, so I cannot order from here. But once I will come back next month in Australia, I will order if I can book.
Yeah, yeah. So we're sold out at the moment, but hoping to make a second edition, which maybe will be available sometime next year if we can get everything sorted out. But it was funny, almost as soon as we published this book, it was already out of date, and people had discovered new orchids in our region. So it will be good to be able to update it with all the new, the new orchids that we now know are found in the Canberra region.
That would be great. So your plan is for the next edition is for, did you say the end of the year, or?
Probably sometime next year, by the time we
okay.
can kind of bring everything together. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So have you got any projects next that you would like to share, or anything, any trip maybe in the Northern Territory Or
Yeah, my partner and I we've got 5 weeks holiday coming up soon, so we're
wow.
about to do a big trip from Darwin to Perth. We're going to drive from Darwin to Perth.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow.
Yeah. So that's pretty exciting. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I've got some ideas. I'd like to continue doing pollination work and kind of photographing and videoing. I think particularly videoing now with the incredible technology in cameras these days, you can get really cool videos. So I'd like to continue kind of working with some of the Australian orchids and getting some good photos and videos. And I've got some papers. I've got a paper published recently on the swan green hood, and I've got some video of that on my website, which is really cool. If
yes,
your viewers want to
I saw that video. Yeah, it's super cool. Yeah.
So little things like that I'll continue to work on. And yeah, I think the orchids of Australia are really quite amazing, and I want to be able to keep on sharing that with everyone.
I really would like to collaborate with you at some point. So
yeah, sounds great.
Okay, thank you very much, Tobias, to be here with us and to have shared your amazing story and your book journey with us. So yeah, maybe see you next in Perth when you will arrive after your next trip, when you are expected to be in Perth.
We'll probably get to Perth in August.
August.
Early August.
Yeah.
So
possibly
maybe I'll catch you.
We're gonna be there as well. Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Not in Perth, but we will be down south. Southwest, of course, Southwest Australia.
Yeah, sounds amazing. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye. Bye.
Bye.